and welcome to Drew's Book Reviews. We are here to have a dark conversation with Strange Mentality Paper all about his dark materials. So, thank you for joining me in this discussion. I know we first talked a little bit about it when I was starting to read the His Dark Materials trilogy after
Yeah,
watching the HBO show. So, you know, thanks for joining me. I know you're a really big fan of this series. And of course,
absolutely.
in the description, I have put the link to both our Discords as well as our channels. So make sure you go check
Awesome.
that out. If you get a chance, or I'm sure you could get a chance at some point, be sure to go check that out and join us on the Discords as well as our channels. Definitely you've got some great content. I wish I had more time to watch more you put out, but finding time can be a bit hectic at times. But I'm glad that you could join me here.
Definitely.
One thing I know you're a big fan. You're probably a bigger fan of the books than I am. Tell me a little bit more about. Actually, just before we do it, one thing that I think we both find interesting about it, or why this kind of appeals to both of us, is um, I'm ex-religious myself, so I'm atheist myself, and I know you're atheist. So a lot of this story. Hey, Bertie, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. So I know a lot of the primary idea behind the story is this idea of religious control versus science and reason, and I think
Mhm.
that's really why it appeals to both of us in different ways. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you absolutely love about this? I know it's one of your favorite series, so tell me why you love this series so much.
Well, first of all, it is my favorite fantasy series. So I like it. One, for the main character, she's pretty unique in the chosen one aspect in that she's not average. She's also not a genius. She's an obnoxious brat. I mean, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
She's a little terror, and I love that. I love the demons that your soul is exterior in the form of an animal companion. This was kind of the book that made me fall in love with animal companions and the ambiance, especially in the first book, which I call the Golden Compass because I'm in America. I know it's
Right.
Northern Lights to you. The ambiance and the coldness of that with the Northern Lights. I was almost going to say its scientific name, but I'm not going to. Not going to do that to myself.
All
But
right.
I'm going to say the
Okay.
ambiance, the talking animals, and Lyra. Definitely, that's what makes me fall in love with it at
I'll
the
tell you.
beginning. So
Yeah, I think I
closing that.
mentioned no, I think I mentioned this in my reviews, but I remember the first time I ever tried reading this series was back when I was still like indoctrinated into the religion I was raised in. And I remember picking up these books and it started talking about demons and it made me
You told
very,
me that.
very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't like this. It's probably one of the first times that I can remember truly DNFing a series at that point or even a book because that idea just, it made me uncomfortable. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's funny looking back on it now after leaving the religion I grew up on, now being reading this, I'm like, what was I thinking? This is not a terrible thing. It's just the way and the terms used to present these spiritual manifestations as animal companions. But it was that word demon. I'm like, I don't like this.
I
Which,
always pronounced it Damon in my head because it's got that
yeah,
AE instead of
yeah.
just an E. But when I did first read that, I was like, okay, that's a little weird that it's called a daemon, but I mean, whatever.
Well, as I read, I kind of think about it's like I think we all have our own internal demons, the darker parts of our souls, right? And if
Yes.
you think about that, is the demons in this story, like they're often the ones that are fighting for their whoever they're the demon for. They're doing the dirty work, right? Essentially.
I didn't realize that until you said it, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. And then when I look at it now in the
Hmm.
worldview I have now versus the view that I had 10, 15 years ago, is that idea that our demons are a manifestation of our soul, but they're the part of our soul that does all the things we wouldn't want to do ourselves.
And that we want to be disconnected from too, I think.
Yeah.
It's the maybe it's like that mirror part of us that we don't like. So they say that everybody's demon is kind of a manifestation of who they are inside. Do you want to do spoilers? Do you care?
I don't care, but let's put out there may be some spoilers here because this is not planned. It's structural conversation.
Yeah.
We're just seeing what happens. So just there might be spoilers. Just putting that out there. Go ahead.
Okay, so all right, I won't talk about Pan. I was going to talk about what he settles as, but we won't do
Right.
that. But we see with Miss Coulter, her demon's the golden monkey.
Yeah.
So something absolutely vicious yet beautiful. It's golden, and we've got Asriel as the snow leopard, who's again vicious,
Love the snow.
beautiful, in a cat.
Love the snow leopard, but I'm a
Yes,
fan of big cats. I
yeah,
love
I am
cougars. I
too.
love leopards. I love them. I mean,
Yeah.
Florida Panthers is one of my favorite teams, mainly because I love their jersey and their Stanley
Okay.
Cup champions, which helps. But yes, snow leopards love it.
Yeah. So we have bobcats in Texas, which are not as lovable, but yeah, there's
Yeah.
that. But no, I do think big cats are pretty cool things. And
Yeah.
we've got our fun-loving navigator Lee, who's got his jackrabbit as,
Yeah.
he's perky on the inside, and that's the I'm blanking on the Hesper, right?
I
For some
think so.
reason, I was
Yeah.
thinking here, yeah, Hesper or Hester, one of those.
Something
But
like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
he's got his jackrabbit, and um, trying to think of who else's demon we know. Oh well, it's that animalistic side of you that you want to separate yourself from. From when I'm thinking
Yeah.
of like knowledge as freedom, which is a huge thematic subject in his Dark Materials, we can see almost like the human bodies, the human people being the knowledge and the light and the freedom and the intellectual side of us, whereas the demons could be our animalistic instincts, like
Yeah.
our emotions, just that more primitive part of us that is not what makes us human, but it's what makes us a living thing.
Oh, 100%. And one thing I really liked about this series is the church in this series. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on what they're calling it, but the church in this
Magisterium.
magisterium. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, I I mean, it's fancy. You got to have something that's kind of connected to the word magic there, I guess. But the
I'm so sorry,
magisterium.
Felix.
Uh, what I
Do you,
really like
sorry,
about
that's my
that.
guinea pig screaming. If
It's
I
all
had a
good.
demon, it would be a guinea pig.
Well, there
I
you
don't
go.
know what you want. What do you want, Felix?
I'm pretty sure
He
my
wants
demon's
attention.
sleep.
He hears
Uh,
somebody that I'm not paying attention to you, not him.
of,
So he's jealous.
of course. I'm pretty sure my demon's just sleeping behind my computer right now.
There you
I'm
go.
convinced that my little Scully is my demon. Oh, what
Yep.
the heck? I'll just, show
Do it.
people
Do
my
it. Do it.
there. There's my little demon sleeping on the patio
Oh.
because she has to follow me everywhere.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I love the how the magisterium is trying to cover up the truth about dust,
Yes.
which they call dust, but again, maybe this is a spoiler, but in our world, because there's a part of the story that takes place in our world, is it's referred to as dark matter,
Yeah.
what they refer to as dust. And I love how the magisterium is working
Do
so
we want to
hard.
say what dark matter is? Because no, in real life, no one knows. But
Yeah,
do we want to say it? Is it? I guess it's kind of a spoiler for book one.
yeah,
But
not the whole series. Yeah,
yeah, so it's sin. So children are sinless, and then
yeah.
um, you see
Another
you see
interesting
the
twist on it,
yeah,
for sure,
yeah. There you
for
go.
sure.
Children are sinless, and that comes from a very actually the magisterium is supposed to represent the Catholic Church, but that's actually not a Catholic thing. The whole innocence of children and the age of understanding and the age of I don't know the word, not
Yeah, I know.
enlightenment, obviously,
I
but
know it
not
can vary from
atonement.
religion. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
it
the
can
age of
vary from religion to
responsibility or
religion.
whatever, where you
Yeah,
can be age of accountability. There it is. The
yeah,
age of accountability that comes from a very Anabaptist tradition, which was an American movement that started in like Rhode Island. Now we just call them Baptists, but the Anabaptists, the Reformed Baptists, and that's why they don't baptize infants because they can't be held accountable for their sin. So I find that interesting that it's not Catholic doctrine that is fundamental to this revelation in the book. This is a Baptist thing, whereas the magisterium, the way it's set up, is so obviously the Catholic Church. The way they're splitting children from their souls, and yeah,
Yeah, I kind of always about the magisterium just kind of being representing organized religion in general, definitely with
Okay.
that Christian leaning, the kind of more of a Christian leaning on that, but definitely I never really when reading it, I never really imagined any one particular religious organization or church,
Maybe
but rather
somebody
just
else
kind of
put
like
that in my head.
organize, maybe I don't know, but just
They
kind
are
of that
called priests,
Christian.
though.
Yeah, it's
They are called priests, and the idea of angels having free will, that's more of a Catholic thing. Not all Protestants believe that. But
right,
I mean, yeah, I think Philip Pullman has come out saying it's just all of Christianity, maybe. But the way the magisterium is structured is very Catholic. I come from a background of Lutheranism, fairly moderate Lutheranism, and Lutherans are structured fairly similarly to the Catholic Church, although the pastors have a little bit more freedoms, less restrictions put on them. Women are able to perform more duties in the church. But as far as the hierarchy, it's pretty similar to the Catholic Church. We even have like a pope figure who runs all the Lutheran, but it's not as like it's more of just like a governing
right.
head of the governing body. It's not like the pope, whereas he's seen as like God's representative on earth kind of thing. He just organizes everything.
No, yeah, fair enough. And like, I came from a Mormon background where it's a very patriarchal organization. And I
Mm.
really kind of got that sense as well from reading his dark materials that the way that the organized Christian religion is represented is very, very patriarchal. And while there are some women who are involved somehow in some capacity, they're really not in a position of authority or power or leadership within the
And if anything, they're
magisterium.
subverting it.
Yeah.
We've got, or undermining it. We've got Mrs. Coulter,
Yeah.
who's, I think she's pretty interesting as a character in that we don't ever really get a good sense of who she is as a person. Um, did you
I,
feel that way
yeah,
about her? Or,
I still don't know if she had an inherent desire to protect Lyra or if she was doing so for different motives. I'm still not 100% convinced on
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's interesting. She's a very just ambiguous person. Hello. Hi.
All right. Maya wants to say hi.
Hi, Maya. Yeah, Drew put himself on mute.
Are you laughing about me?
Yes, we're laughing about you. Now go.
Dad,
I would
What?
say,
can I can you help me to come in my room?
No. Bye. Life with children.
I don't have children. I mean, I guess technically I have 150 of them, but yep, they're not they
You
don't
get
come
to
home with
send
me.
yours home at the end of the school day.
Yes, exactly. I get to escape them. I guess there's
Yeah.
no escaping yours. But
No, but they could be fun too. But yeah.
I mean, we could make the argument that maybe purposefully she's left a little bit blank so that we can project our own feelings onto her, or he just didn't intend to fully flesh her out. I don't know. I am a little bit um I Drew, how much do you write? I know you write a lot of book reviews and they're
I
very well written, but on the creative aspect of it, uh how much
I've
do
I've
you,
always got I've always got ideas in my head, but I've
yeah.
never really sat down and tried to, flesh out a whole book or story out of them.
What happened to
Yeah, and one thing, so I teach ninth grade, and
Sorry, just a moment.
parenting break. Let's fill the silence. So, what I was gonna say, and I guess Drew's still listening, so I'll say that so there's not silence
Yeah,
on the stream, is that I teach ninth grade,
yeah,
and one big section of our curriculum is author's purpose. So I definitely every time I read, because I write as well, but also because I teach office author's purpose in depth every year, often multiple
yeah.
times throughout the year. I do find myself when I'm reading wondering why authors make certain choices they make. And I am left kind of scratching my head as far as Mrs. Coulter's characterization, why we just continually just call her Mrs. Coulter instead of she has a name and they tell it. Her
Yeah,
name's Marissa, right? Isn't
yeah,
it Marissa or something like that?
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yet we just always call her Mrs. Coulter, and it was not a happy marriage, clearly.
Well,
I think
obviously they're not together anymore. I mean, happy
I
marriages
think he
don't
died.
split,
Like,
right?
yeah. I mean, but like, should we give? I don't know if we're gonna give it away, but I mean,
Right.
she's called Mrs. Coulter all the time, and even when things are just told from her point of view, she's just always referred to as Mrs. Coulter, and that strikes me as a means to keep her a little bit more distant from us, the audience,
I never really
in a
thought
way.
about it that way, but I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense with that for sure. Uh, I mean, it depends on how it's written for me. Like if I I don't mind when an author leaves somebody mysterious. It kind of leaves you in a position it's like, well, what were their motives really?
Yeah.
I don't mind doing that. Like many times throughout the story, especially when she had Lyra,
Mhm.
it's hard to me to see that as not being selfishly motivated for her. I feel like there was more to it than just really wanting to protect her daughter. That was a front to justify her decision and the action she was taking. Hey, Epic, glad you could join us.
Even in the end, how it ended with her in Metatron, or how
Yeah,
however it's pronounced, you think she didn't come out of it when she, met the end of her arc, we'll say.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Honestly,
No, that's fair.
it's
Very fair.
you
How
know,
she
I
felt
mean,
towards Azriel. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
they
sometimes these characters, and of course, this is applicable in so many different books. Like sometimes they will behave in a way in order to retain the image they want to present, which isn't necessarily a reflection of their actual internal motives.
I
And
don't think we get very far into her internally. We
yeah,
we don't
that's
get
shit we
very,
don't know,
yeah,
right? Because
exactly.
we don't really get a lot of intro because she's definitely not the main character. She definitely plays an important role, definitely as kind
I
of
would call her
a
the main antagonist of book one, definitely though. Yeah.
oh for sure. Of course, Liars being like the main
Yeah.
character in the whole
Mhm.
story for sure. But yeah, it says I'm not sure about where what her true motives were, but definitely seeing what role she played in the overall arc. With that in mind, like I know you've read the books. I'm sure you've watched the HBO adaptation.
Yeah.
I know adaptations can be definitely a hit or miss with the fan base.
Hit. Total hit for me.
Total hit, awesome.
Total hit.
I
And
I
I've
enjoyed it.
read all of them. I've read all the Book of Dust that's out so far, so just the first two technically. I've read all the novellas, and I even read the little cash grab journal called like, not Demon Voices, like I think it was the Imagination Chamber, where it was just Pullman's notes that he put together writing. Um I think I might have sold that because I needed cash. Because you sell, like, there's a store here called Half Price Books. They give you cash for books. I
Oh,
was like, oh,
nice.
I've read this. It's pretty. Maybe they'll give you money for that. But I've read all of them, and the series takes a lot of that extra content that's not in the main trilogy and puts it in the series. Like there's a novella about Lee Scoresby and Yorick, the bear, and Hesper,
Love the
and a
bear.
lot of that is taken in, especially during the part in season two where he's imprisoned by Mrs. Coulter. Um, when his backstory comes out, that's all from the novella. And then when we see at the beginning the sort of prologue of Lyra being dropped off during a flood, that's the whole plot. Like that's how the first book of the Book of Dust ends. La Belle Sauvage. You're Canadian. You can speak the French here, not me. But
Trust me, I can't speak French.
yeah, but that's basically how that book ends. So
Right.
it takes a lot of the overall just complete HDM content, not just the original trilogy, and puts it into the series.
I love the
Definitely to
Bear.
flesh it out more, and because film's a visual medium, we just need more to keep ourselves looking at the screen.
Oh, definitely. I think there's a lot of books out there where you really have to take a very different approach to the adaptation. Just just diverting a little bit. I mean, a classic example of that is Dune, especially after the first book, where there's not there's a lot less action in the following books than the first one, and so
Mhm.
you really have to adjust how you present that. And that there are a lot of books where you got to do that. And I think taking some of that material from the Book of Dust, as you mentioned, I haven't read the Book of Dust yet, so don't know
Recommend.
a lot about it. But well, I might get to it someday. We'll see. But good to know you recommend it. But of taking some of that material and putting it into the series to kind of help flesh out the visual medium of it better, I think is a good way to approach these adaptations. And there's so many books where doing it that way is a good way. You don't necessarily have to stick to one book per season or one book per movie, right?
I don't know what's going on in the chat over here. Do you know this person?
I don't know.
Okay, well, hi Wesley Curry the
Yes,
second.
yes. Hello.
Okay then. Well, anyway, speaking
Hey, you're
of
giving me
adapt
views, so thank you for being here.
yes, I was not very old on October 10th, 2005. Okay then. All right.
All right,
Maybe
yeah.
does this have something to do with your 666 views that you got
May- Maybe I
today?
don't know.
I don't know.
That
Did
was
we
pretty
did we
awesome.
invite someone in here? But
Apparently,
what
the
I
voice
was
of Satan, but I don't know.
yeah,
I
what
don't
I
know.
was going to say was that speaking of adaptations, I think I may have told you this, but for those watching, did you know that His Dark Materials is a Paradise Lost retelling?
That I did not know actually. I've never
The
read
last
Paradise Lost, so
you have read?
I have not. No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I read it in high school. I don't really remember it. It's not easy to read. It's a pretty difficult read. Um, but the line I have a
Okay, bye,
t-shirt.
Wesley.
I have a t-shirt that says the line it's from, but I'm just gonna let Paradise Lost, His Dark Materials, and we'll get the quote right here. It's so beautiful. Let's see. Into this abyss, the womb of nature, and perhaps her grave, of neither sea nor shore, nor air nor fire, but all these things and their pregnant causes mixed confusedly, in which thus must ever fight, unless the Almighty Maker them ordain his dark materials to create new worlds into this wild abyss. That's where the title comes from. It's
Now
pretty
that
it's
I
pretty
did not
stirring.
know. Yeah, for
His
sure.
dark materials to create new worlds. Yeah, and that final world, um, that's Eden-like. I think it's even described in the book as being Eden-like. And we haven't spoken about Will yet, but why Lyra and Will, they awaken and are Adam and Eve. But Lyra okay. Um anyway,
This
so
Wesley guy, I tell you, like, what the hell you doing, man? Like, get out of here. We're gonna be branded now. Something about
okay.
cash and money.
Gray
Okay,
scabs.
bye.
Did we attract? I wonder if we attracted like some religious nut because we're talking about this. That seems the most reasonable. Or it's a guy just trolling us, but he's a
Yeah,
good
whatever. He's
troll.
gone now.
Okay. Well, anyway, Lyra is actually supposed to represent Eve, and I don't know if you heard this when you were like looking into the series, but they kill God in the end. Is that something that came up when you were hearing about it?
Not when I was first hearing about it, no. And I also didn't
So
really know the whole idea of Lyra being Eve before I actually read the whole series.
yeah,
Um, I I knew
that's
it
where
was
the
kind of like
confusion.
magic and
Yeah.
church and science and that kind of thing,
So
but beyond that,
that's where the whole killing God thing kind of comes from, which clearly we know they don't kill God. Um, but Lyra and Will are supposed to be Adam and Eve, and they create a world where the magisterium, which represents organized religion, is no longer needed. So, because they kill the false god, I guess, uh, they find out that the god's not really a god. He's just an angel posing as God.
Yeah,
God's not really God. It's just the projection of every religious person themselves. We say God is real. He's you. That's why he believes what you believe and hates what you hate and all that
yeah,
stuff. So I feel like that's what that represents, and that gets misconstrued by religious people as the reason this book is evil is because they kill God in the end, which they don't. So it's kind of like that thing, tell me you haven't read a
yeah.
book without telling me you've never read a book type
Oh
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
I do love the idea the angels in these books, like they're not just like these divine creatures.
Mm-mm.
They are beings, almost like just a alien species, almost from
Mhm.
another realm, which I really liked about that present representation of these angels, just like these manifestations of beings from another realm, but not necessarily inherently divine creatures. And it seems even among the angels within the series, there is division and different factions within the angels.
So how do Mormons see angels? I'm
Uh,
curious.
Yeah, basically just like divine beings that live with God, basically. Mormon angels don't have wings or halos or anything like that.
Well,
It's
neither
just
do
like,
Christian ones, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if you read the Bible, they're actually horrifying looking. They're
Oh,
terrifying.
I know. My daughter wants to get a biblically accurate angel as a tree topper for the Christmas
Oh,
tree.
that I've seen that. I've seen that. They're terrifying, and
Yeah,
that's probably the reason every time they appear, they say, "Be not afraid." And if I had seen something like that, I would be pretty darn afraid. So
I'd
I
just be looking
can't
to go, what the heck is that thing? That's what I'd be saying.
scary, terrifying. Oh my gosh,
I
like
know, right?
cherubs. You know what cherubs really look
Oh,
like? It's
yeah,
scary,
yeah,
terrifying. But I was gonna say that I know Catholics believe that angels have free will. They're like you and me, they're just divine and closer to God. And they they can choose. And so the reason really Lucifer fell was because he was seeking truth, and knowledge is a sin in
yeah,
Christianity. And I don't think I ever really learned what Lutherans think about angels, but it's probably pretty similar to what Catholics believe about angels, in that they have free will and
yeah,
they are intelligent beings. They're not just like God's minions. Um, I think when my mother grew up Baptist, so my grandmother was Baptist, so well is. I mean, she's still alive. And so I went to like a lot of Baptist vacation Bible school stuff, and me and my mom talk about like her being Baptist growing up. She went to a Baptist college, and they don't believe that about angels. They don't believe angels have free will. So, but I don't know how they reconcile that with how Lucifer fell. So, who
I
knows?
in my experience, religion's really good at believing in contradictions simultaneously. But that could be a subject for a whole nother stream on
It
a
could.
different focus channel.
Exactly.
but but yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the angels just being like just different beings, no really no different than you. Definitely more powerful in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but also weaker in a lot of ways. Like these angels in his dark material certainly have significant weaknesses that we don't generally consider angels as having. I believe,
Right.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're presented as being physically significantly weaker than us.
Yes, they look, I mean, they are like, we look at like a medieval painting of women and how women were kind of portrayed as almost childlike, but not
Yeah,
really, that like sort of glowing innocence you see about a child, but in an adult's body,
yeah,
that sort of romanticized ignorance and just kind of like weak appearance. Um, that's kind of how I felt like they were portrayed. And yeah, they weren't the big 9 foot tall, beautiful, glowing creatures. They just looked like regular, kind of skinny looking people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, I don't know if you thought about this much, but I don't know if I'm just getting this from the HBO adaptation where it was in the book because at this point it kind of all blurs together for me.
Yeah.
But I loved how at least a couple of people from the leadership of the Magisterium, their demons were literally snakes,
Yes.
which I love that because the snakes are like the ultimate bad guy in the
Yep.
Christian religion. And here we have the leaders of the Magisterium, the religious representation of organized religion in this book, and their demons are the snakes, which I
Yes.
absolutely love that.
There was a snake, there was a rat, there's all those animals that humans are disgusted by. I have the same. I probably have the same omnibus you do, and that's the I read out of a digital one, starting 2019, ending just before the pandemic. But I did read The Golden Compass as a child, and when I first started reading it again as an adult, I was like, "How did I get through this as a kid?" Because the language is kind of purple in there, and it opens in media res, so yeah, as a young mind, I'm not quite sure how. I mean, obviously, I didn't comprehend totally all of it.
Yeah.
And in that way, it could totally be just sorry, there is a gnat in here that's harassing me, but it could totally be seen as kind of an anti Narnia in a way where that sort of anti religion is just going to go over kids' heads and it's just going to tell a good story. Whereas Narnia, it's like the religion is is
Oh my god,
piled
I
heavily
didn't
on
even
you, but
think
I
about
didn't get
that.
it as a
Narnia
kid.
is like until you mentioned it didn't it never even occurred to me. Narnia literally like the opposite of his Dark Materials.
I just killed the gnats.
Good job.
Yes.
Like I
Sorry, it was
never even
driving me
thought about
nuts. It was trying to
Narnia.
get in my
Yeah.
eyes but I got it.
Oh my gosh, it's
Um,
been so long since I've read Narnia. Like I definitely
well,
saw
I mean,
like the
Lyra is like an anti-Lucy.
yeah.
And we start in a wardrobe, don't we?
Does
Don't
Lyra?
we open in a
She
wardrobe?
does. Yeah, she does. She was hiding in the wardrobe. That's right.
Yeah, she was hiding there with her demon when she overheard something she wasn't supposed to overhear. Wow. I mean, I know it was kind of meant to be the anti-Narnia, but I didn't realize how friggin' just like literal he was going for it. And Lyra even kind of sounds like Lucy. Does a little
Lyra's
bit.
fun.
Yeah.
I like
Lyra,
Lyra. She's fun.
yeah. The name Lyra. I love that name. That's a cool name. But
Yeah. If I had read the books before I had kids and loved it as much as you, one of my kids probably would have been named Lyra.
probably yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you want your kid to turn out like Lyra in the beginning at least. She's a menace. But I did
Yeah.
not actually I really liked the actress. She was a great actress. Evidently she was I haven't seen this movie, but the Wolverine movie, it's called like Logan or something. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't seen it. No.
Okay, well she's the little girl from that movie. And
Oh, okay.
we know his Dark Materials came out right after Game of Thrones ended. And when I first saw um the trailer for it, I was like, "Oh my god, it's his Dark Materials." And then they showed Lyra and I was like, "She looks way too much like Arya."
Yeah.
She definitely looked a little bit like Arya in there cuz Lyra's described
Yeah.
as being blonde.
I I
And
don't think this is the first adaptation of his Dark Materials, though. I'm pretty sure there's been other
no,
ones.
there was a movie with Nicole Kidman and it was just the Golden Compass, and that's was like my first real exposure to the whole controversy around it. I didn't know it when I was 10. I just checked it out of the school library. But yeah,
Surprised
I
it
knew
hasn't
it
made a
had it,
bad books list yet.
no. But I just knew back then there's actually something that happened over Christmas time that's kind of funny now that I think about it. My cousin was saying I guess, we were at the kids' table and the adult table, they were talking about it. And my cousin had said something like, "Oh, I might go see it." And his dad, my uncle, was like, "No, it was written by an atheist and you're not going to have any part of it." And my cousin was just like, "Okay." Like after
Oh
being
wow.
scolded by his dad in front of everybody. But
Jeez.
I remember asking my mom, I was like, "Why does everybody hate that book?" And she goes, "Well, there's something about killing God." So yeah, but both my parents love the show. My mom says if she ever gets to retire and live happily, she's gonna read the books. But My
Well,
parents aren't as big of readers as I am, but they are readers, but they're more like a, you know, one book a month kind of person. They always have something to read, but they don't go at it as hard as we do.
it's funny that it's something about killing God, as you put it, is what's sparking so much controversy among certain communities.
Yeah.
And the reason I find that kind of funny is because in Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, there's a character that literally declares God is dead. And whatever
Mm,
that being was, it was never God to begin with. Like, if his Dark Material is getting that kind of heat for that, how is Sanderson just coasting by and nobody bats an eye, making the
because
same
Mormon.
kind of idea?
I mean,
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe the fact is that that book, Sanderson's book was not written by an atheist, but this one was. They, you know, if we look at the idea of the concept of God is dead, why does the personal beliefs of the writer matter to spark that controversy? Which just kind of seems funny to me. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but when you think about it, it's like, oh, well, this guy's not atheist, therefore it's okay for him to have somebody in his book say that same kind of thing, but not this guy because he never
But
believed
is
in
that
God.
the like big overall abstract overarching theme in there, or is it just a guy saying that?
Well, it's kind of woven into the whole Cosmere as a whole. Like the whole idea behind the Cosmere is that the Cosmere was created by God's death and pieces of God were scattered throughout the universe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it's kind of more of a whole overarching idea behind that. But it's just
I
funny
haven't
to
read
me.
much Sanderson.
Yeah.
I read Tress and I read the second one, the time traveling one. But the
Oh
only
yeah.
one of the Cosmere I've read is Tress, and I loved it. And his first
Trust is a
one,
fun book. There's
yeah.
so many there
And
are so many things about connecting to other series and Trust, but it was a fun one. Yeah.
and then I've read part of Elantris and just kind of put it down, and will eventually come back to it. Um, I Elantris was I could definitely see the religious tones in there, um, but I I found it good. Like I was really, really enjoying it when I read it, but I wasn't like wanting to pick it up the same way I was with Tress. I loved Tress.
Oh yeah. I got a really nice I got the Kickstarter backer editions of those four. So
My
worth it.
parents got me it for Christmas that year, and I'm looking at them. I can see them from here. So, uh, yeah.
Nice.
So they're beautiful. But I read Tress and the medieval time traveler thing on
Oh yeah.
digital, and then asked my parents to get the books for me for Christmas.
So do you have any like collector editions of his Dark Materials as far as physical books go? Like I just got the basic paperbacks.
I have an omnibus that right now is being used to hold other books up because I'm double stacked. Um, so I don't have it readily accessible, but let me see if I can. I have an omnibus. I did want like um what is it called? I guess the Juniper editions. So
Okay.
let me see if I can I share my screen and show you share screen. So let's just do this. This is the one I have. This one. And I have a little clip on my channel that I sent into another booktuber when he was going around just to other booktube channels
Right.
and was like, "Do you want to come on my channel and talk about your favorite fantasy book?" And so I did, and I talked about his Dark Materials, and you can see it in his video, and I released it as like a little 1 minute clip on mine where I just describe his Dark Materials and why it's my favorite, and I'm holding it there. But since it's fairly tall, it's like this
Right.
big. I used it because I double stacked my shelves because I just don't have a lot of room because I live in a little apartment. Only
Yeah.
room for one bookshelf.
Same here. When we moved, I had to get rid of half my books. It made me very, very sad. Even though
Yes,
they're books I'll probably never get back to rereading, it still made me very sad.
they're
I,
pretty.
I,
They're nice
I
to look at.
yeah,
Let's face it.
yeah. I went from like a 1,700 square foot house down to about 1,000 square foot apartment. So
With you
it's
and your two kids and your wife.
three at the time. One of them's moved
Uh,
out now, but yeah, it was unfortunately a necessary move. But yeah, I know the pain
Yeah,
of not having room for my books. I've resorted to buying things on Kindle and being very exclusive on the ones that I purchase in physical
yeah,
format.
same.
Anything
That's how it
Sanderson's going to be bought in physical. Like I've already pre-ordered book 5 of the
really.
Stormlight. No way I'm not.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm gonna try Stormlight again. I keep saying that I will. I just when I first tried to read it in 2020, my experience with fantasy was pretty much limited to Harry Potter and his Dark Materials and the Lord of the Rings movies and the Game of Thrones series. So Sanderson's style is I don't know if I can call it style, but the
it's simple prose. It's definitely simple
it's not
prose,
the
but it's
prose, it's the world, where like we use Atlantis for example. Serene's best friend is a glowing green orb. It's that sort of weirdness that
yeah.
lacks the whimsy, whereas Tress has the whimsy on top of it, sort of like the I'll mention Neil Gaiman. I know what's going on with him, but sort of like the Stardust whimsical weirdness, whereas Sanderson, it's grown up weirdness. The
Well,
whole
Elantris was one of his first books.
I think it
He's
was his
definitely come
first book.
along. Yeah, it's the first one that got published, traditionally
Yes.
published, I believe.
And
But he's come a long way since Elantris, a long
oh, I'm
way.
sure. And
So
I liked Elantris better than when I tried to read The Way of Kings, and I will try again. And I have a large, massive hard copy of it, and that's what I'm going to read out of it. And I'm going to try it again. I couldn't follow it at the beginning. There were just too many moving parts. I do see actually my copy of his Dark Materials. Wow. I don't know how I missed it. I see it now, but because I'm looking at my shelves. So, but y'all have seen it. I put it on the screen.
yeah,
I guess I didn't use it to prop something up, but yeah. I do
yeah,
see it.
how good.
Now I see it. But yeah, I had just read it when I wasn't, I guess, ready for it. So,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
definitely big books. I think book 5 of the Stormlight Winds and Truth is like 1,335 pages or something like that.
I love long books. I love long books that are
It's
worth it in the
massive.
end.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love them. Yeah, and I do like little short books that leave a really lasting impact on you in very few pages, but there's something about losing yourself in a really, really long book or binging a
yeah.
trilogy like I did with his Dark Materials, and it has that payoff and makes it just such a great experience. That feeling, that's something you only get from a
Oh,
long book.
oh, for sure. And I think his Dark Materials is definitely going to be a series that I'll always think back to like some of the most interesting series I've read. Some of my favorites. His Dark Materials is going to be in that list somewhere.
You did
Probably not as
say
high as they are for yours,
Yeah.
but
You did say
definitely
you couldn't
memorable. So
understand though why it was considered one of
I,
the greats of
I,
fantasy, which I
I don't.
totally
I
see that.
honestly don't. But
I
yeah,
can see that why you would think that because I think maybe it's because it was kind of cutting edge when it came out. It was really I mean, can we say it was the first fantasy book to really bridge YA and adult? It came out in like 2000, maybe 1999. Those first Harry Potter books are very clearly children's books. And
yeah.
this one really could be or maybe isn't. Like
It,
Pullman
yeah, it's
has said
definitely
he didn't write a
possible.
child yeah,
Yeah.
because Pullman said he didn't write a children's book. That's just how they decided to market it as just YA. Um,
Uh,
but
I mean,
yeah, I
definitely
it's
like
kind
the
of hard to
series,
put into
but
words about why I
yeah,
understand why you think that. And I think you've been having a hard time putting into words too why you think
yeah,
what you're thinking almost.
yeah. It's
So,
as for a book series, a story, a concept, ideas presented within it. It's definitely a unique. I haven't seen any animal companion stories that are presented in quite the same way that his Dark
mhm.
Materials is. Like it's a very unique approach to having these animals as part of our companions. There's so many great things about this series, absolutely.
Oh,
But
definitely.
yeah, it's just like
As
one
one
of
of
the
the
things.
big
One of
staple
the
heavy
greatest
hitters.
ever. Not sure I'd put it like
Yeah,
call it
one
one
of
of the
the
greatest ever. Still good, still enjoyable,
yeah.
and I'm really glad that I read it. And I think I'll always remember it as
And I
one of my
disagree with
favorite
you there,
reads.
but it's very hard for
Yeah,
me to tell you why. um, I,
exactly,
it's
exactly.
just
Yeah.
this thing that it has. Let's just put it that way. It's this thing that it has. Sorry, I'm gonna move. My back is kind of
Yeah. I mean,
seizing up on
I
me.
get why Lord of the Rings is held up as like the standard of fantasy because it's really what invented the modern fantasy.
Yes. It did.
right?
And
But
I
in
haven't
actually reading it, it can be kind of dry at times, honestly.
I've tried to read it. It didn't work out. I've tried the
But
Fellowship
you
of the
know,
Ring.
I kind of, and you may be right in that it was one of the first books that kind of bridged the fantasy YA gap.
But would
Um,
that be a reason for it to be
I'm
considered
not
one of the
sure.
greats, you
Yeah,
know? Like,
exactly, right? I mean, there's a lot of YA fantasy out there now. I know Harry Potter is generally considered YA fantasy as an example of that, but I think it's noted that came out after his Dark Materials.
I
I
think
mean,
it
I could
actually
be
came
wrong.
out around the same time.
Maybe they did,
And
yeah.
Philip Pullman has said that he finds it hilarious that the Christians have gone after Harry Potter when he specifically wrote kind of an anti-Christian book, yet Harry Potter gets all the vitriol.
Oh,
Like
I know.
not all of it, but far more than he does. He's
My
come out and
daughter's
said,
teacher has a Harry Potter shrine in her classroom.
"Who?
My daughter's teacher, she's
Yeah,
got a Harry Potter shrine in her classroom. She's got
yeah,
multiple copies of the books. She's got
oh,
like the sorting hat. She's got a
yeah."
wand, and like
And
you
she
just
hasn't
walk
had
in there
parents.
and
Has she has parents come all over her?
well, not that she's told me about, but I mean, when I was in that class, I'm like, sweet, a Harry Potter shrine. I'm like, I'm guessing you're
Nice.
a Harry Potter fan.
Yeah, yeah. My I've already had I just moved to a small town. I'm sort of at the what I'm going to call the buckle of the Bible Belt, far north Texas, right on the
Right.
Oklahoma border. And I already had a parent get on to me for using Adam and Eve as part of our creation myths section. We did Pandora's box, and I mean it's a helicopter parent, but still, yeah, one of my honors students. So in my
Oh,
honors class, we looked at creation myths. We did Pandora's box. We did the Aboriginal dreamscape. We did the Japanese myth. We did the world on the back of a turtle, and we did Adam and Eve. And I referred to
the
it as
Discworld
the
one.
Hebrew myth, and that upset her. And it didn't even like occur to me that that might cause issues, but
Oh,
it
yeah,
did.
that's just ridiculous. I am 100% a fan. I think books should be available to everyone, including his Dark Materials. And definitely, I'd imagine that in the Bible Belt, there's got to be parents that would
I,
object to something like his Dark Materials being in their school libraries.
and I can respect that
Yeah,
as far as parents not Harry Potter. I think is a little ridiculous. I
yeah,
can respect religious parents not wanting their children to read this. That's their right as a parent. If they say, no, this doesn't follow my values, so I don't want my kid to read it, I respect that. But when it's something like Harry Potter, no, this doesn't follow my values, so my kid's not going to read Harry Potter. Harry Potter does not have an anti religion, overarching theme. His Dark
yeah,
Materials does. If you're a religious person and you don't want your kid to be a part of that, that's your right. That's fine. But certain other books that get that kind of vitriol, it's just like makes me roll my eyes.
yeah. What drives me up the walls when they go out of the way to take books
Yeah.
out of school libraries based on the ideals of a
Yep.
rather outspoken minority group of people.
Yep.
Uh, that's
I
what drives me up the wall. And it's and I have like I said, I haven't actually heard of his Dark Materials being banned, but I know other books are like there's a Margaret Atwood book, Oryx and Crake, that was recently banned in the state of Utah from all
uh-huh.
public libraries and schools. Which I'm like, wow, really, Oryx and Crake? Okay. I mean, I get
Um
it. There's some sensitive content in
I
that,
think the
but
original version of Little Red Riding Hood is banned because she's got a wine bottle in her basket. Um
jeez.
All Boys Aren't Blue was banned. It's mostly sort of the sexual ones that get
Yeah,
banned. Um yeah, there's a couple others. Also the critical race theory. So the graphic novel New Kid was banned. And we're saying banned. They're not banned, but they're just
yeah,
removed from libraries.
yeah.
That one, Dear Martin, was challenged. Um, a lot of Jason Reynolds's books have. The Hate You Give was challenged. Um, the Hill We Climb was banned.
Hey,
So yeah.
Sochi,
Hello, Sochi.
thanks for joining us. Yeah, there's a lot that have fallen on that list. I'm actually glad to see that I haven't seen his Dark Materials make one of those lists. I think that's a good thing,
Yeah.
because surprising, admittedly, considering the type of story that it is. but
I think
I'm
it's a
happy that it
little bit
hasn't been.
too intellectual. I don't think the parents kind of get it in a way, you know.
Yeah. But
Um,
a great story overall. Like it's almost got in a lot of ways. It's almost got all the classics of even I would even argue some of that ancient Greek mythology of descending to the underworld, and coming
yeah.
back from the
Mm.
underworld. Like that's one of the aspects I think I enjoyed most about it. Is it?
You want to talk about the personification of death, literal
Yeah,
personification of death?
yeah,
I'm go ahead, finish what you're saying though. That just popped into my head and had
yeah.
to come out of my mouth before I forgot.
It's all good. I think that's one of my favorite aspects of this story is the literal descent into the underworld in the realm of the dead, and even complete with the ferry crossing.
Yeah.
Like that is I was reading that, I was thinking, well, hello, River Styx.
Hello, yes. Pay the
You know?
ferryman. That's our
Yeah,
saying. And
yeah,
she did with her soul. He couldn't go
yeah,
with her. Oh my God. You know me and
yeah,
animals. So when I saw that scene of her having to leave Pan on the dock,
yeah,
and hearing the little ermine squeaks, I had to
yeah.
get up and just like hug my guinea pigs. And I watched it with my parents. And I was like holding on to my mom like a little baby because that scene really, really got me of separating the animal. But
Oh,
when we talk
yeah.
about death, I'm actually reading another YA series called Everlost. It's right now, that deals with death. And when we talk about paying the ferryman, you got to pay him with a coin in Greek mythology, right? I don't know a lot about Greek mythology, but or like, do you pay the ferryman with a coin, or how do you pay the ferryman to
That
get across the river Styx?
that's how I've heard it, but in some stories it's a coin, and his dark materials she paid with her soul,
Right.
essentially. I think I just kind of depends on the sort of the when all said and done, you got to pay the ferryman.
Yeah.
How you pay that ferryman can definitely vary from one story to the next, but the ferryman's got to get paid, and that's
Right.
the key element, right?
So in
So
Everlost by Neil Schusterman, there are coins in this like after place called Everlost where kids they don't they call it get where you're going. They got lost on their way to the light and ended up in Everlost. And the way they get to where they're going, whether that's heaven, hell, or just whatever's on the other side, is they get a coin, and everyone has a coin when they come into Everlost. And so when you hold your coin, it starts burning and you get this faraway look in your eyes, and then you're ready to move on. And that it just reminded me of that. So, but off topic, but we're talking about the ferryman and Lyra's death. What
yeah,
is Lyra's death in this series?
what it yeah, I mean at the spoiler alert at the end, Lyra's not really dead.
Well, that and
She comes
also,
back from that. So did she die and get resurrected essentially, or was she did she somehow, you know, break the rules essentially and circumvent that whole thing? Was
well,
she
her
able to?
death is a person
Yeah,
who comes and speaks to her,
yeah.
which that's why I say the literal
Well, I
personification of death. It's a person.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy idea that your
Yeah.
death is someone who it's definitely one
Has
of
been
the
with you and has
better
known you,
interpretation of death
and
in literature.
the
I
fact
mean,
that your death knows you better than your own soul does.
yeah, that
Yeah.
that's just crazy. I mean, now that I really think about it, if I were to name some of my favorite personifications, favorite representations of death, I think I'm gonna have to put his Dark Materials and Death from Discworld like right up there at the top.
Yeah.
But I, yeah, until you kind of got into a further explanation, it's like, right, that is so that is so true. That's such a unique way to represent death.
And
Uh,
she's not she's ominous in her own way. She's creepy in her own way. But again, kind of like the angel, she's just a normal looking woman
yeah,
who, yeah. I mean, that's not what we think about when we think about the perception of death. I think we think the Grim Reaper, or at least most people do, when they think
yeah,
about death having a literal form. But nope, this is just, and it's interesting that it's a grown up too. It's not a child,
yeah. And your
which
death
is nice.
is unique to you,
Yes.
which I mean, can you imagine a world where we could actually see our own death and talk to our
I
own
don't think
death
I would
like
want to live in that world.
I'm not sure I would either,
Yeah.
but I think it'd be a very unique experience to learn about yourself in a way you can never. do otherwise,
Hmm.
right? Because your death can tell you things that you never knew about yourself, never understood about yourself. So it's almost like that subconscious representation of ourselves that we keep buried and hidden
Yes.
and refuse to see. And at the time of death, we can no longer refuse to see it. It's at
Yep.
that point that we have to accept who we inherently are as individuals, both in terms of our soul and everything else about us, right? Now,
Hmm.
personally, I'm not a believer in the soul,
Right. Me
but I
neither.
definitely understand that there are those that do. I mean, it's interesting. Like I've got family members that are much like myself, who are atheists, who don't believe in God or gods or souls, and I got others who are like, well, I believe there's a God,
Mhm.
and to say, well, why don't you believe in God? And that's a whole nother discussion, of course. But definitely that personification of death, I think, is a unique way to approach that, whether you're someone who accepts a belief, a religious belief, or not. The idea that your death can bring out everything about who you inherently are in ways that you couldn't even imagine.
Right.
It's just such a unique way to do it. I can't think of any other book that's done it that way.
I don't think I can either. Now that I think about it, um, what I and remember how they get out of the underworld? That big
Yeah.
line. Tell them. Can you finish it? Do you remember? Tell
Yeah.
them what? Do you
Well,
remember?
I'm picturing the scenes from the HBO adaptation. Like I said, it's kind of all blurred together, but I do believe they use the subtle knife to cut their way out of the underworld.
Right, but in order to, like, wake people up, they say, "Tell them stories." So your life is the stories you're able to tell,
Ah, yes.
is kind of how that comes from. Because remember, they're there and they're not really themselves, like, they sorta remember who they are, but they
Yeah.
can't really tell you anything about themselves, and so we are the stories we're able to tell. I find I kinda got that from that, and I think it is re there you go.
Yeah.
See
Yeah,
what he's where? It speaks to the power of storytelling, turning the mirror on our inner self or feeling.
yeah.
And we see that when they say, tell them stories in the underworld when they're coming out of the underworld. They
Yeah,
call the land of the dead.
yeah, the land of the dead. And then of course when they leave, they just kind of dissipate into the universe, which I thought that was really that was fun to see in the visual.
Mhm.
Because essentially what I'm seeing here is in this representation, our souls are trapped in the underworld, and in order to escape that underworld, we have to come to terms with who we are. And then once you've done that, like the essence of your soul, the energies of your soul can just once again become part of the greater universe, kind of thing.
And I like
Although
that there's no and in the series it's kind of like a almost blank moment. There's no swelling music. There's no like flashbacks to their life. It's just
it doesn't need to be,
no,
right? It
no.
just makes it simple. Although they, what are they, the Nuefla or what? The
The
animals with roller
elephants,
feet.
yeah.
Yeah. I
I
laughed at that and I didn't really understand what the point of that was, to be honest.
Are we
Who are
supposed
the
to?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's just a quirky thing that seems to be thrown in there, and I feel like with that in or out, it wouldn't have made a whole lot of difference to the
I don't
overall
think
story.
so. I don't think
But
so.
it was funny to see and funny to read about. I'm just imagining these alien elephants rolling around on these ball nut things.
Yeah, but in the book, the wheels don't like they defy physics.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, like Mary's looking at them. Mary plays the role of the serpent. She tells Lyra and Will about this love affair she had that made her leave the church, and that's when they sort of awaken and enter puberty and discover they're attracted to each other. And after that conversation that happens in the Garden of Eden world, um, and there is some controversy about what Lyra and Will what they actually did. In the books, they're just kissing, but there is a scene where they go back to like a tent together or something. And it kind of is left up to you what they do in the tent, but it's
I'd say
not
it's
really
all it's I'd say it's implied, and that's all we need to know, right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
I read something online about that, but when I first read it, I didn't that didn't click with me that oh maybe something further happened, but maybe I didn't want to think about it because they're like 13, 14 in the book, and then in the show, Lyra's like 16. She starts at 13
Well,
and ends at 16, I think.
if they'd
But I
gone
know in the
beyond
books,
going into the tent together, it wouldn't have been classified as YA. Like, let's
well,
be honest, right?
uh, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really recall thinking that was inappropriate or whatever happened, but there's another nap between them in any other way other than the kissing. But I mean, I will say, as far as casting in the series, they did a really good job of finding a little girl that was like about to hit puberty. The way she just looks, like you can tell she's 12, 13, and they filmed both seasons back to back so that she couldn't age too much. So season one and season two, that's why we got season two right as COVID was starting, because they filmed them so close together so that Lyra, or the girl playing Lyra,
Good
wouldn't
timing.
look too old when they came back. And I thought it was interesting that they still showed Roger. Roger had clearly aged
Yeah.
from when we saw him in Lyra's Oxford to when we saw him in the Land of the Dead. He was older, and they were just like unashamed about that. So that
Well,
was cool.
they can't really go back in time and get the younger actor.
Exactly.
I mean,
But I mean,
you can recast him, but if you want the same person to play him, you kind of got to work with the
they could have filmed it though. They could have filmed it when he was younger.
True.
So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, Pullman's philosophy of death, the soul, is tied to his perception of sin, good life, and the conscious, the soul. He thought guilt was the church's tool to wield people's will, a tool for control. Which, yes, there's a big conversation between Lyra and Azriel towards the end of The Golden Compass, or Northern Lights for you international
Yeah.
people, where they talk about that, about original sin, and we suffer for our ancestors' sin of eating an apple and how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
So guilt is a major tool that Christian, or the church, uses to
Oh,
control Christians.
big time, big
Yeah,
time. I mean, I got a friend, godless engineer. Haven't watched much of his stuff
I love his
recently, but I had an opportunity to be on his channel a few years ago talking about, my
Oh, you gotta
transition
send
out
me
of
the link.
religion.
You gotta send me the
And
link.
it's kind of one of the things that came up in discussion, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time, like that was like 2017, so quite a while ago. But it was the idea of guilt and sin
Mhm.
being methods of control. Like in my experience, that's very, very true. And I know there's definitely a community out there that won't like to hear that, but I'm just being honest.
And there's
And
also the foil to that with the need, or I'm gonna say the demand, to forgive people when they wrong you, or
yeah,
you're going to be guilted into thinking you're the bad person for not forgiving somebody. And
yeah,
that's something that I really dislike about this idea, because Christians believe that Jesus died for our sins, and
yeah.
he forgave everybody for doing that because he loved us so much. So the ultimate showing of love and being a good person is forgiving the unforgivable, which I find almost as victim blaming in a
Yeah.
way. If you can't forgive, you are a bad person. So, and there's a big difference between moving on and forgiving.
Yeah.
And I feel like well, no, I know for a fact in Christianity, they lead you to believe you cannot move on until you forgive people,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is just not
And
true.
no, definitely not. And I think there's definitely room for a lot more literature like his Dark Materials in the market. And I would love to see more stories tackle this idea through a fictional narrative. And one thing that I really kind of believe is that it's sort of the stories we tell ourselves as a culture, a reflection of how our culture thinks and feels. And they
Mhm.
are a fantastic tool to open up that discussion
Right.
about different ideas, with whether that's political, social, economic, religious, whatever. And I am 100% a fan of the idea that no subject is taboo. uh, they're you can approach things in an effective way. There's poor writing and there's good writing.
Right.
Ultimately, the subject itself should never be taboo. And this discussion is an example of how literature addressing what might be controversial ideas can actually create good conversation
Right.
about the very ideas that these books and literature uh, represent. We're doing a Dune buddy read over on my channel as well over the next couple of months, and even Dune tackles these ideas of
It
religious
does.
control.
Isn't Paul supposed to be the Islamic Messiah?
It definitely feels Islamic, and the Fremen culture definitely feels very Islamic inspired to me. I haven't actually, when reading it, like I don't view the Muad'Dib religion as Islamic itself,
Okay.
but definitely inspired by the Islamic desert culture
Okay.
for sure.
'Cause based on I haven't read all of Dune, but based on what I had heard, is was that Paul was supposed to, I guess, either maybe I guess it seems more like he's an analogy, I guess you could say, for the being the Islamic Messiah. But I thought he literally was, or maybe he's
Yeah.
using that religion as because it's thousands of years in the future. Maybe that's what Islam becomes, or he was just inspired as whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I'm not
that's just the
overly
conception I
familiar
had.
with
It sounds like.
yeah. I'm not overly familiar with Islamic cultural traditions and religion. I have basic understanding of what Islam is, but I'm not really that familiar with it. So, maybe someone who's more familiar with it would be able to tell have a different view on that, but yeah.
When I deconstructed, I looked into a lot of different religions. So I probably more know more about Islam than I think most non-ex-Muslims probably would.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I've conversed with a lot of ex-Muslims. I read the Quran. I actually read the Bible and the Quran, not all of it, in high school, which was why I kind of felt safe using Adam and Eve as a creation myth because I did that in high school and I graduated in 2011. That was not that long ago. So it was
yeah.
very surprising that mom wasn't okay with me doing that. Now, just imagine if I had used the Quran like my teacher did
Oh, geez,
in
yeah, no
world
kidding.
literature. But yeah,
Yeah, so
we read
well,
them as part of our Middle East folk tales or myths or something. It went around the world, and we did Greek, we did East Asia, and we did Middle East, and we did Legend of Gilgamesh, we did Ancient Egypt, we did the Quran, and we did the Bible. So it was just
there's a
I don't
lot
know. I
here.
think maybe millennials might be more. I think the problems we're having with children now that we see all over the place and why people don't want to teach anymore has to do with what the parents have done to them. Yeah.
Maybe. I only cause problems at the kids' schools when there's actually a problem. But I
Yeah.
suppose our opinion of what actually is a problem are different. I do want to ask, so of course, knowing how much you love this series and the idea of this whole, knowledge versus religion, science versus religious control, do you have any recommendations for any other book series that kind of tackle these same ideas that we see brought forth in Philip Pullman's book or Philip Pullman's books? So, like ideas that is the main idea which they're tackling and addressing, as opposed to book series where maybe that kind of comes into the discussion and is part of the story, but not really the main focus of it.
Um, I can think of books based around the Crusades, but as far as more in like a um, abstract way that his Dark Materials does, I'm struggling to think of things. There are definitely books that try to reconcile from a Christian point of view terrible things Christians have done in historical fiction, which is my main genre. We have lots of books about the Crusades, and it's starting to be like a redemption arc, but then they sort of lose their faith when they see all that carnage. Um, some like the um, well, I just watched the movie The Witch. That could kind of be one.
Okay.
1630 and just shows paranoia and the fear-based puritanism of that and how scared they were of the devil. But it's everything I've come across is way more in your face than this. I can think of books on the other side of the aisle who use religion in a a pro-religion stance that do that. Obviously, there's Narnia.
Yeah.
There's also a series for adults called the Circle series, written by a man called Ted Ducker, who's a pretty good writer. I've read some of his books. So that one is also portal fantasy, but it's instead of a wardrobe or a tapestry like the Fiona Var tapestry, it's a guy living a double life when he sleeps. So,
Okay.
but as far as with anti-religious themes, I cannot think of one. So,
I guess maybe that means it's unique and it stands alone in how it approaches this. I hope
nope,
maybe one day
nope,
we'll
nope.
see some more.
I'm changing my mind.
Okay. Okay.
Unwind, Unwind by Neil Schusterman.
Oh, okay.
It criticizes specifically Christianity a lot by tithing. Um, I don't know how much you know about Unwind. Um,
I know about
it,
tithing, but not on mind.
so we could also say in Scythe too a little bit. Have you read Scythe?
I know about it.
Okay.
I love the concept behind it, but I haven't read it.
So there's no religion in Scythe because people have mastered death, but there are what's called tone cults where there are monks who worship sound, basically, the tone the earth gives off. I don't know if Neil Schusterman's an atheist, but he certainly comes off as one in his critiques of religion. Even Everlost, I by Neil Schusterman has some tone that is not overtly anti-religious, whereas Unwind is. So Unwind takes place after the Second Civil War. It's in the future. It's dystopian. The Second American Civil War was fought over reproductive rights, and abortion in any form has been completely outlawed. And so, to reconcile for this, to end the war, parents are allowed to unwind unruly children and retroactively abort them. So, basically, your body parts and your organs get painlessly taken away from you and given to people in need. So that's the form of medicine. So if I'm someone who suffers from chronic migraines. So to get rid of my migraines, I would get the brain, I guess, of a troubled teen. Or to cure my spinal arthritis, I would get the spine of a child who's been unwound. And
That's just weird.
it is weird and it works. And there's also an aspect called storking, where an unwanted child can be left on the doorstep of a family. And if they answer the door one day and there's a baby on their doorstep, they have to raise it. And the children being tithed, are children donated to be unwound. And they wear all white all the time. And they're given a tithing party at the age of 13. And so there's a character named Leave who is a tithe. He's 13, and he's the 10th child. We donate a tenth. We tithe a tenth of all our earnings to the church, and so they tithe their son to um, be unwound. And they talk about storking, which is leaving the baby on the doorstep. The stork comes and
Yep.
brings your baby. And he says, well, storking's in the Bible. And the two other characters, Risa and Connor's a troubled teen whose parents unwind him. And Risa grew up in a state home. So she grew up in a state home. She's a ward of the state. So her last name is Ward, Risa Ward. And she's an average person. She doesn't do anything great, so she's a waste of space. So they're gonna unwind her, and they encounter each other and go on an adventure to try to stop unwinding people over 5 books. And he says storking's in the Bible. Moses was storked, and it was
Right.
because he was put in a basket sent down the river. And I thought that was a really perfect representation of Christians taking the Bible to mean whatever the hell they want it to mean.
Yep.
And so, yes, if I were to say another one, Unwind, big time. So, Unwind
Try to
is,
remember that because that
yeah.
that sounds kind of creepy, disturbing, but also interesting to read.
And as
Well,
someone I spent some time in the troubled teen industry, that really, really stuck with me because of how critical it is, both of religion and trying to rehabilitate these bad kids,
For sure.
troubled teens. And so, um, actually, me and a few other, including Paris Hilton, weirdly, me and a few other survivors of this industry are working to hold those homes accountable for what they did to children um, through just an act called SICA, Stop Institutionalized Child Abuse. And it was overshadowed, extremely sadly, the bill that was going through by the Uvalde shooting, but it's kind of picked up steam again. So when I was reading that, I read that in 2022. And my favorite book of Unwind, it's actually a 4-book series with a short story collection, and my favorite book was actually the short story collection. Neil Schusterman is great at short stories, and I think Scythe now has a short story book. Well, I know Scythe now has a short story
All right.
collection as part of it. So
One of
his
these days I get
representation of death in Scythe is pretty interesting in that it's called gleaning, and in Unwind, you're not being killed when you're being unwound. You are living in a divided state. So he deals with death in an interesting way too. He's got an entire book about the afterlife, entire trilogy. So,
I'll
Unwind
get
came
to it
out during,
eventually.
yeah, came out during the YA dystopian craze. I think 2007, and because that was the same year the Hunger Games came out, and then I think Divergent was like 2 years later, it did fly under the radar, and in my opinion, is the most underrated YA series of all time. So glad it's getting some publicity here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And well, if you're recommending it, then I'm sure it's great because I know you have good taste. I haven't watched all your videos and bookish content, but I see some of the videos that you post. Like, yeah, that looks like an interesting concept for sure. So I'll get to them eventually. I
Yes,
do, and
they're quick. They're
yeah,
young adult.
yeah,
But yeah, in my I think it was Atheist Books 2.0 video, I talk about it a lot.
yeah. Well,
And I've
definitely.
been wanting to do a why you should read Unwind and just haven't gotten to it. But
I'm
yeah.
gonna see if I could find that video on your channel or send me the link and I'll add it to my watch later. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up for today. So I do want to thank you very much for joining me today to have
Thank
this
you.
dark discussion on his dark materials and all the all over the place that we ended up going. Still a lot of fun. So
We've been planning it for a while, since what,
yeah.
like July? Before July?
So
When did you
something
first
like
read
that, and
this?
I always love just kind of go with the flow, see where the
There we go.
conversation takes us. So it's a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me, and of course, don't forget links below to Discords and our channel. So don't forget to check that out. To everybody who tuned in and is watching later, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, until next time, keep on reading.